How to apply and render more difficult textures onto complete or parts of an object. Hello everyone, in this video I'm going to review an interactive tutorial from SelfCAD's website that creates this object. The tutorial itself actually creates only the tube. I've added the box because it was shown on the rendered image on the tutorial, and there's actually some unique challenges we can do. I will start, what you see over here first of all is you see the render mode. I clicked render image and render this just to show you how it looks after rendering, because it doesn't look nearly as exciting in the normal mode. I will start the tutorial and quickly go over because of the challenges, but beforehand I just want to tell you what I'm going to cover. So the tutorial itself shows you how to create the tube. It's actually interesting. It uses shape generator to create the tube, and then it's basically skewing them using the taper mode to taper this, and how it creates the nut and screw. Rather quite interesting how it's being created. This is actually something you screw on the tube basically, and then it has a selection challenge. So we need to select faces over here, and there's some challenges need to overcome that I'm going to show you how it's being done. And finally it's going to show how to apply the texture and overcome challenges, and I'm going to create the box for you as well outside of the tutorial just to explain more these challenges. If I still have time, I'll jump into the render and quickly show you the idea about rendering. So to get started, I will start playing tutorial. If you want to see only the texture part, you can skip through where I start talking about the texture, but I will anyways go through this very quickly. So I have already downloaded the tutorial itself and uploaded from here, so I can start playing. So the first thing it does, it creates the shapes using shape generator, and I'm going to go quickly through it. I'm just going to tell you the main points to look for. Is that we're going to do the set fill top to false. This is this section over here. We don't want to fill the top, and I'm just going to go next basically to set the size of this, which is basically just creating a simple cylinder at this point. Now it goes down to create a second segment, and all we have to do the second segment is we have the fill bottom default. So the first section actually filled the bottom. We want the bottom to be filled, but now the bottom is the connection between these two, so it unchecks the fill bottom. Now if you see, the fill top is already unchecked because every segment you add remembers the previous section, and you just have to make the changes. So in this case I just have to make the changes to the fill, and also have to change the sizes, which I'm just going to click next, and basically creates a small size keeping the top and bottom closed. Now it adds a new segment, and it changes basically just the size, nothing much to do, and it finalizes it. So this is the basic tube structure without a screw, without anything. And I was going to add thickness. So the problem here is that if we didn't fill the bottom, this is basically, it's technically hollowed, but it's not really a 3D object. It's considered just a surface because it has no thickness. If you would have turned on the backface coloring, I can obviously not do it in the tutorial, it blocks it. So you know, while in the tutorial you would see the inside color, the color of inside faces. So now I'm going to add, it adds thickness, and a thickness of 1, not a big deal. But this is it's important to see, because this is what's going to complicate selection later, because now we have thickness, we have inner faces and outer faces, and you see later why this is going to be a big deal. So now what's going to do is it's going to create the cap over here, and it's just going to create first of all nut and screw. So what we're doing over here, we actually changing, you see the default is to create a screw. It's actually going to change, you see over here it changed it to create a nut, and it changed it and positioned it over here, we create just a nut. And the thing is, the object itself, the tube, and has some angle, and the nut is basically straight aligned with the global axis. So as a consequence, you see the nut actually pulses through a little bit, it's not perfectly aligned. So what we're going to do now here is we're going to deselect the tube, and we're going to work only with the nut, and we're going to deform it using taper. So I'm just going to click next. Next, it's basically tapering it in a way that it's positioned using the same angle as the object itself. And now we're left to basically imprint the threads from the nut onto the object, and for that we're going to use simply stitch and scoop, which is basically removing the nut from the object, and that creates this. So now we have this section included on it. Okay, so now the designer is going to add basically another shape, which is going to be to add the cap over here, and for that is using just the shape generator again. I'm just gonna finalize it, simply click next, and you see over here we created this cap, but it has no threads, no nothing. It's not a nut created, it's just created a basic shape. And I'm assuming the designer does it because he wants to make sure to first scale them. First of all, adding thickness to it. At this point, we're adding thickness. And it's hard to see because obviously it's on top of the object, but it has added the same thickness of one. And now what we're going to do here is we need to imprint make sure it has the same threads onto the nut. So it becomes a nut basically. The simple hollow cylinder becomes a nut, and for that we're going to remove the difference, this section. The thing here is, if you see over here, if I can zoom into it, you see already this created this nut over here. This is basically, oops, but you see the nut, this got created a nut. But in this case, if I remove it, it's basically going to delete the other object. We don't want that, so we're switching on to keep the subtracted object, and I'm finalizing it, and we got both objects and everything else. Now I'm going to uncheck this, and we're simply doing coloring now. So we're going to color this cap over here, and we're going to hide it away. Okay, so moving back now, we're going to work only on this object, and here starts the selection issue we're going to do. So designer wants to color that, leaving a margin on top and a margin on the bottom. So basically the image will be applied only to kind of maybe a quarter of the circumference, and also a margin top and bottom, and the object itself doesn't have that structure. This was no additional faces, no nothing. It's hard to do that. So the design is using cube selection, and I'm just going to click next to select this, and you see what it does. It basically selects just this section over here, and it leaves a margin on the top and a margin on the bottom. And if the exact selection is on, this basically cuts it. So it makes it this section over here. The problem we have over here, if this is selected, it's just using cube selection, selects everything in its path. And as a consequence, the inside is also selected, as you can see. The inside is yellow, this is also selected. And this will make a problem because we don't want to add a texture to the inside. But because we have added thickness, we have no faces in the inside, and the cube selection selects them inside. So cube selection is a good idea to make the cut, but it's not a good idea to use them as a final selection. So somehow he turns on the wireframe so we can see what's happening. And he's actually using over here advanced settings, and he's actually deselecting it. So you see, because now we don't want to select this, and he's going to make a custom selection using loop selection. But now we already have the proper cuts. You can see over here in the objects, let's see, so we select this. You can see over here, this was the cut, made it here, and it added this slice over here and the slice over here. Now there are many different ways you could have made these cuts, these slices, but the main thing I want to point out is not just how the designer made it, but I just want to point out the idea of making sure you don't have the inside faces selected. Now we selected only the outside. And this sometimes you have to be careful what you use, because I can only use loop selection because they're still quads. In many cases after stitch and scoop, they will no longer be quads, will be more difficult. So you have to be very careful when and how you select them. Each case is different, but this is basically a general selection issue, making sure. Okay, so now instead of applying texture directly, now the designer is doing the inverse selection and first going to assign the color to the remaining part, which is simply white. And now doing inverse selection again, basically keeping this selected. And now moving to the material section. Okay, so in the material selection, this is where it starts the basic texturing. So we go to texture, we don't want to touch material, colors, all of this, we don't care about it because we're using a texture and just using the color from a texture. So we go to texture, and instead of choosing an image, a standard image, it goes to a custom image. And now it's going to add a custom image. Normally when you click add, you will have to browse from your computer, while in the tutorial, it has this option load from tutorial. So we're going to load the texture from tutorial, which basically loads it in. So here's where the challenges starts. This image actually is not a good image for a few reasons. Number one, it has a big margin. You see over here, it kind of sticks in the air. What happened over here is the image, the PNG itself is much bigger. It just has some transparency over here. There's a transparent background around the entire thing, and the computer has no way of knowing this is not part of the image. So it thinks the image is much, much bigger. The second thing is the image itself, you can see, is at an angle. So we're gonna have to, if you want to align it perfectly, we're gonna have to rotate somehow, make it work. So these are the challenges we have, but nonetheless, we imported this image. Now we click on the image to assign it, but because of these challenges, these extra and so on, it's not aligned. You see the part over here is basically aligned just on this section. And now we're going to go to UVs, and we need to assign the UVs to do it. For that, we're going to unwrap it. And we can choose a standard UV from mapping, but this is not going to work. So we have to go to unwrapping, and in unwrapping itself, we have two options. You have the auto unwrapping, which is going to try to fit all of the faces onto the object. And this actually is not going to work here because it's going to think the image is much bigger. It's just not going to align it. The idea of manual unwrapping, which we're going to use, it's going basically to make sure the entire selection unwraps as a single image. So look, if I unwrap it, it gets a single image. But the problem here is that I mean, this is not a problem. It's just not aligned. And this may be because the image is bigger. We don't see it actually over here. And maybe for any other reason, it's not aligned. So I need to align this on top of this. If in any case, for example, if you use the cube selection to select and it has the inside faces as well, you will see more than one image, more than one profile basically over here. That means something is wrong. The same thing would be if you have a difficulty selecting and you're selecting some faces that are cut off, they're not connected properly or something. You will see more than one profile, and this is not good for manual unwrapping. Manual unwrapping, to work correctly, if your selection is correct, this needs to create a single profile. This is not the case for auto unwrapping. Auto unwrapping is a different task, but for now, manual unwrapping. So now all we have to do is position it, and for that we're going to use this gizmo to move it, snap it in place, and now we're going to move from the move tool, go to the rotate, and we're going to rotate this into place. It's going to basically over here. I need to find the place where it tells me to snap. Okay, it's over here. And there's something wrong actually with this tutorial. It's a bug that I reported that's going to be fixed. The recording, something is wrong. It didn't assign it. So I'll fix it later. I'll come back to it to fix it. But this basically needs to align it straight. There's something wrong at this point with the tutorial itself. It's not the tool, it's the tutorial itself. So I'm actually going to leave it, just go next. This is actually gonna give me a bad selection here, and I'm just gonna finish the tutorial. I'll come back to fix this. So what I'm going to do now here is going back to, I guess, the normal mode, and you can see something is wrong with this image, and it's going now to use the deformation to taper it and make the bottom of this taper. But in order to make it the correct taper, it's going to switch taper to the top. So we taper from the top. That's how it's going to make the bottom thinner. Whenever you taper, this is basically the bigger size going to be, and the other side will start going shorter basically. So we taper in two directions, the Z direction by 90, click next, and then we taper also the other direction, the X direction, by -20. So basically we got this assigned over here. Now we close it, and we basically select this as well. Let's see what it wants to do now. Highlight, let me just click next. Okay, it's done basically. Okay, so I'm going to fix this, and again, this is a tutorial bug that it's going to be fixed, but it wouldn't affect you if you do something manually. So I'm going to go back to the material section, and I'm going to go, I want to show you actually, it's a good way to see. If you have more than one material, it will show in the list over here of materials. If you don't select anything, just the entire object. And if you click on it, it's going to flash which material you have. So you see material 1 flashed this one. So I know this is material 1. So now I'm going to go to edit UVs. I don't need to unwrap it again, just edit UVs. And I go preview. And now I can basically rotate it correctly and make them look correct, basically correctly. Okay, so I'm going to do basically rotating it like this. And this is already skewed at something because of this bug. So I'm going to use actually the flatten tool to make sure they are flat on each side. Just going to flatten them, make sure they're flat. I think they're flat here as well. And now we're going to scale it to position. So basically scale it like this. Okay, and now we're going to finalize it. And let's take a look. This is perfectly aligned. So this is working perfectly fine. Here I think I left out some transparency. I left over something here. I have to make sure, but let me just fix it up. So let me just go to material 1, edit UVs, preview. So here let me just go to scale, scale it down. Like this. Okay, So now this problem is fixed. As you can see over here, this is perfectly aligned. So this is basically the idea over here. Now I want to show you here also what I did with the box. So first of all, let's rotate this. The way it was positioned, this is going to be rotated around the z-axis by 90 degrees, something like this. Okay, so now I'm going to create a new object, a cube, and I'm going to size this by, let's first do default, and let's size this by 200, the width, and the height should be, I think, like 50, something like this. I'll make the depth also by 50. I think that's about the size, and I'm going to move it up by 50. Okay, so maybe 25, yeah. Okay, so this is basically about the size that covers this object. And I want to show you here how you can apply the same texture now to the complete object. So I'm going to go now, I already have stored this custom texture. If I go to texture, if I go to custom, it's already stored that I uploaded in tutorial, but it's still kept over here in my custom textures. So I'm going to apply this texture, and what you see over here, it creates a lot of empty spaces basically. And why is this happening? It's the same idea, because it has this transparency, so it actually correctly applies transparency, which looks like basically some gaps. So I'm going to go again to the UVs. In this case, I don't want to unwrap. I have the correct original UVs, which is correct UVs. I just want to go to edit UVs, and I'm going to preview this, and I'm simply going to scale it down. Now I have a problem here, the image is at an angle. I can play with this and try to rotate it a little bit, but yeah, it will take too much time and it's difficult to rotate. In general, I would say these rotations are much better done. You prepare the image correctly, instead of rotating the object. But nevertheless, if I just do it like this and finalize it, you have this object correct. This is all correct, and so on. So now I'm going to just select all of them, and I'm going to go to the renderer. In order to use the renderer, you have to use either the desktop version, then it's automatically working, or if you use, like I do now, the online version, you have to open the small renderer on your computer. If the first time you do it, it will actually show you here how to find the renderer to download that application to render it. But once that application is downloaded, you have to just open it, that's it. So I've already done it before recording this, so I can start rendering. Okay, so now when I render, I want to show you the options here. So first of all, this is what you position, what you're going to see. This is like the window for what's going to happen, what you see. And this is basically the same idea you have with textures. It must be a factor of 2. This basically must be kind of rectangular. You cannot have it any odd shape. Yeah, so that's basically it. And I want to show you the idea here. So in order to show the texture, this has to be matte. If you're going to change to any of the other options, it's actually going to remove the texture. So the default is matte. I'm using just the default. I think you can go here with restore defaults just to show all of the defaults. And you can also change all of these other settings. So you can go with the camera. I don't want to touch the camera. You go with wall lighting. So I'm going to use with sun. And in the sun, you have a lot of settings. I'm again going with default settings, just with the default settings. And then you have the background plate. This is important. So if you turn off the plate, it's basically going to be like a flat image. If you turn on the plate, it's going to have this plate over here. You can see it in a second when I start rendering. And then you can decide which material the plate should be. So let's say I'll make it metal. The plate material should be metal. And you can have a lot of other, I can make it basically default, looks like metal, carbon, that's the default. And you can do the image resolution, the size of the images, and you have some other settings here if you want to use the GPU accelerated. And you can do scene light, and or you can do what lighting could be HDRI or sun or dark void. If you want to do scene light, you'll make it dark void and then use custom scene lights. But I'm basically doing almost everything here, if not everything, just standards. And then I start rendering. So once you start rendering, this is basically what you're going to see. The background plate is this. In the rendering, you have this option what the background should be. The background could be transparent. So you're going to see basically nothing transparent in the background. Or it could be a color, specific color you can assign to it. And whatever, let's say assign green to it, certain color. Or you can be the original. And the original basically is what you get from the lighting effect and so on. And basically you render it. So this can take, depending on your computer, it can take whatever, anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the complexity. This particular, you see we already 35% done, so it doesn't take much time to complete the render. You can already see this is nice. So Okay, so I paused the video for about 3 minutes, I think, was it? And we already 98% completed. And this depends obviously on your GPU. I'm using it on a laptop, not very powerful. And depends also obviously how complex the object is, and that includes the scene around and everything else. Sometimes the last 2% can actually take longer, proportional to the other percentage, but we're almost done. I just wanted to show you the last step, which is actually denoising. When you see that, you see denoising, that's basically what means it's completed, that's finalized it, and then you have the option to save image. You click here, save image, and it downloads the image. That's basically it for this tutorial. I hope this was helpful, and please let me know in the comments if you want me to show anything else, or if you have any other question about SelfCAD. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye. Yes, one last thing I just adding now that I just realized, if you saw when I rendered it, the cap was actually being white, and right now we have a color to it. So what I did when I rendered it, I selected all three and went to rendering, and in that case, if I go to the settings over here, materials, basically I have an option color, but it will color everything. But actually I realized I can uncheck, select only the selection over here works. So if I do selection, I already colored that, you can see. So it was white, now it's going to render white. But if I choose a color for it, and now I'm going to render it, you'll see this is actually going to render the color over here. I'm just interesting, this is a different subject, but the colors is not always exactly identical the way they look on over here on the color picker or whatever, these color pickers. This is something else, a different discussion. But nevertheless, this is just, I wanted to show you that. So, okay, thanks again, bye.